They laughed at my son's science fair project, then a woman in a suit walked in and changed his life. I never expected a science fair to be the thing that changed my son's life, let alone become the stage for one of the most satisfying moments of vindication I've ever experienced. Life as a single parent isn't easy. I work as an office administrator at a local insurance company, pulling long hours to make ends meet while trying to be there for my son, Ethan. He's 11, quiet, and incredibly curious about the world around him. While other kids his age are obsessed with video games and sports, which he enjoys too, don't get me wrong, Ethan has always had this amazing ability to notice things others miss. Ever since he was little, he'd point out patterns in nature that I'd completely overlook. He'd collect interesting rocks, leaves, and bugs, carefully organizing them in little containers in his room. His mind works differently, and I've always tried my best to encourage that, even when I don't fully understand his interests. When the annual science fair was announced at his school, Ethan was thrilled. He immediately knew what he wanted to do. Instead of the typical volcano or solar system model, he wanted to study the ant colonies in our backyard and how they helped spread wildflower seeds. "Mom, nobody notices them, but they're like nature's little gardeners," he explained, eyes wide with excitement. "I've been watching them for weeks, and I think they're helping the wildflowers grow better than anything else." Who was I to discourage such enthusiasm? So for the next month, our dining table became Ant Research Central. Ethan built a small observation chamber from old plastic containers, collected soil samples, and spent hours documenting which seeds the ants preferred to carry. He meticulously tracked the growth of wildflowers in different parts of our yard, correlating it with ant activity. His project evolved into a study on how local ant colonies could be crucial for helping native wildflowers thrive, complete with hand-drawn charts and a proposal for how this relationship could be used to restore local ecosystems. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but it was thoughtful, passionate, and surprisingly well-researched for an 11-year-old. Science fair day arrived, and Ethan was buzzing with nervous energy as we set up his display in the school gymnasium. "Do you think people will like it, Mom?" he asked, carefully arranging his observation chamber and charts. "They're going to love it, honey," I assured him, though I couldn't help but notice some of the other displays around us. There was one in particular that caught my eye. An elaborate miniature nuclear reactor model with blinking LED lights and a digital display. Next to it stood a woman I recognized as the PTA chair, Mrs. B, fussing over every detail while her son Timothy stood by looking bored. "Timothy's project demonstrates nuclear fusion," she announced loudly to anyone within earshot. His father, who works at the research center, helped him understand the complex physics involved. I just smiled and continued helping Ethan, who was too absorbed in making sure his ant observation chamber was properly positioned to notice the commotion. As people began to filter through the exhibits, Ethan eagerly explained his project to anyone who stopped by. Most visitors listened politely before moving on to the flashier displays, but I was proud of how articulate and passionate he was. Then Mrs. B stopped by our table, her son trailing behind her. She glanced at Ethan's display with barely concealed disdain. "Oh, how quaint," she said with a forced smile. "Ants, is it? Timothy built a nuclear reactor model. You know, real science." Ethan's face fell slightly, but he tried to explain. "Actually, it's about ecosystem restoration and how ants help native plants." Yes, very nice," she interrupted, already turning away. "Come along, Timothy. Let's see the robotics display." As they walked away, I could hear her saying loudly, "Some parents really should guide their children toward more appropriate projects." My blood boiled, but before I could say anything, Mr. F, the science teacher, approached our table. He glanced at Ethan's project, raised an eyebrow, and muttered to another teacher, "This is more of a gardening club entry, not real scientific inquiry," before walking away. What hurt the most was seeing a group of kids from Ethan's class snickering at his project after overhearing these adults. One boy pointed at the ant chamber and said, "He just put dirt in a box and called it science." Ethan's shoulders slumped, and the excitement drained from his face. "Hey," I said gently, "don't listen to them. Your project is amazing." "They're right, Mom," he whispered. "It's not as cool as the others. I should have made a robot or something." "No way," I insisted. "Your project shows real observation of the world around you. That's what science is about." But I could see the damage was done. My bright, curious boy spent the rest of the fair standing quietly by his display, his enthusiasm crushed under the weight of dismissive comments and outright mockery. When the winners were announced, it came as no surprise that Timothy's nuclear reactor won first place. Mrs. B beamed triumphantly while Mr. F praised the technical sophistication of the project. Ethan's project didn't even receive an honorable mention. As we were packing up, Mrs. B made a point to stop by again. "Better luck next year," she said with a smug smile. "Perhaps you could guide him towards something more substantial? Timothy could give him some pointers if you'd like." I was too focused on my devastated son to respond properly. All I could manage was a tight smile and a we'll consider it. The gym had nearly emptied when we finished packing up Ethan's project. He moved mechanically, carefully placing his observation chamber in a box. "I'm never doing another science fair," he mumbled. My heart broke. This was a kid who collected bugs for fun, who spent hours watching plants grow, who got excited about things most people never even noticed. And in one afternoon, a bunch of shallow, judgmental people had made him feel like his curiosity wasn't valuable. "Listen to me," I said, kneeling down to his level. "Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand, or they only value things that look impressive at first glance. But real scientists look deeper, like you did." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. As we were about to leave, I noticed a woman standing by our table. She was sharply dressed in a navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. I hadn't seen her during the fair and assumed she was another parent picking up late. "Excuse me," she said. "Is this your ant and wildflower project?" Ethan nodded shyly. "I'm Dr. L from the Regional Ecological Research Institute," she said, extending her hand first to Ethan, then to me. "I've been observing the projects today, and I have to say, yours caught my attention." Mrs. B and Mr. F were nearby, pretending to be engaged in conversation but clearly eavesdropping. "Really?" Ethan asked, perking up slightly. "Absolutely," Dr. L said with genuine enthusiasm. "Your observations about the relationship between this specific ant species and native wildflower seed dispersal align with some research we've been conducting." She knelt down to look at his observation chamber more closely. "May I ask how you constructed this? It's quite an effective design for field observation." Ethan's entire demeanor changed. His eyes lit up as he explained how he had built the chamber, the different soil layers he'd included, and how he'd discovered that the ants preferred certain seeds over others. "The most interesting part," he said, gaining confidence, "is that the wildflowers grew better in areas with more ant activity. I think it's because they don't just move the seeds, they also prepare them somehow." Dr. L nodded thoughtfully. "That's called scarification. The ants actually damage the seed coat slightly, which can help some seeds germinate more effectively." She pointed to one of Ethan's charts. "Your data here seems to support that hypothesis. This is genuinely fascinating work, especially for someone your age." I glanced over and saw Mrs. B's mouth hanging open slightly. Mr. F had gone oddly pale. Dr. L turned to me. "Your son has an exceptional eye for ecological relationships. We have a youth science initiative at our institute that focuses on citizen science contributions to ecological research. I believe Ethan's project would be a valuable addition." She handed me her business card. "I'd love to discuss this further with both of you. There might be an opportunity for Ethan to develop this project with proper equipment and mentorship." Ethan was practically vibrating with excitement now. "Really? Like with real scientists?" "With real scientists who would be lucky to work with such an observant young researcher," Dr. L confirmed with a warm smile. As we left the gymnasium, I couldn't help but notice Mrs. B's stunned expression or the way Mr. F suddenly seemed very interested in Ethan's project that he had dismissed just hours earlier. In the car, Ethan clutched Dr. L's business card like it was made of gold. "Mom," he said quietly, "someone actually thought my project was good." "Not just good, honey," I corrected him. "Important enough that professional scientists want to work with you." He grinned, wider than I'd seen all day. "Can we call her tomorrow?" "First thing," I promised. As I drove home, I felt a complicated mix of emotions, pride in my son, anger at how he'd been treated, and a small, growing sense of vindication. The people who had laughed and dismissed my son's work had been proven spectacularly wrong in the span of a single conversation. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of an incredible journey that would not only transform Ethan's confidence and future, but also bring the sweetest form of justice to those who had been so quick to judge him. The next morning, I called Dr. L as promised. I was half expecting to leave a voicemail, but she answered right away and seemed genuinely excited to speak with us. We scheduled a meeting for the following weekend at a local nature reserve where her institute had a small field station. During that week, Ethan was a different kid. The excitement of being recognized by a real scientist had completely overshadowed the disappointment of the science fair. He spent hours researching more about ants and native plants, jotting down questions he wanted to ask Dr. L. "Mom, did you know some ant species farm fungi?" he asked one evening, barely looking up from a library book he'd checked out. "They collect leaves but they don't eat them. They use them to grow fungus gardens underground." His enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself learning alongside him. It was a welcome change from the quiet, deflated boy who had left the science fair. When Saturday arrived, we drove to the nature reserve where Dr. L was waiting for us. The field station was modest but impressive. A small building equipped with microscopes, specimen storage, and various scientific instruments. "Welcome to our little outpost," Dr. L greeted us warmly. "This is where we do a lot of our field research on local ecosystems." She introduced us to two of her colleagues who were equally interested in Ethan's observations. Dr. M, an entomologist who specialized in social insects, and Dr. P, a botanist focused on native plant restoration. "We've been studying the relationship between ants and seed dispersal for certain endangered wildflower species," Dr. L explained. "But we hadn't fully mapped the specific behaviors you observed with this local ant species." For the next few hours, Ethan was in heaven. The scientist showed him how to use professional equipment, taught him proper sampling techniques, and listened attentively to his observations. They treated him not as a child with a cute project, but as a young researcher with valuable insights. "Your observation chamber design is quite clever," Dr. M told him. "With some modifications, we could use something similar for more controlled studies." By the end of our visit, Dr. L had a proposal. "We'd like to offer Ethan a spot in our Young Ecological Researchers program," she said. "It's a mentorship opportunity where students work alongside our scientists on real research projects. We'd provide equipment, guidance, and a chance to contribute to published research." Ethan's eyes widened. "Published? Like in real science journals?" "Exactly." Dr. L smiled. "Our citizen science contributions are acknowledged in our publications. And there's also an opportunity to present at the Regional Youth Science Symposium in 4 months. On the drive home, Ethan couldn't stop talking about everything he'd learned and all the possibilities ahead. As a parent, seeing this transformation was worth more than any science fair ribbon. Over the next few weeks, our lives fell into a new rhythm. Twice a week after school, I'd drive Ethan to the field station where he'd work with the scientists for a couple of hours. They provided him with a proper field kit, including a digital microscope that connected to a tablet, collection containers, and precise measuring tools. His project expanded significantly. Now he wasn't just observing ants in our backyard, but systematically studying multiple colonies across different habitats in the nature reserve. The scientists taught him proper research methodology, data collection techniques, and how to formulate testable hypotheses. I was amazed at how quickly he absorbed it all. Scientific terms that would have confused me became part of his everyday vocabulary. I'd catch him muttering about myrmecockery, apparently the technical term for seed dispersal by ants, while doing his regular homework. One evening, about a month into this new adventure, I was picking Ethan up from the field station when I overheard Dr. L talking to him. "You've got a natural talent for this work," she told him. "The observation about the relationship between soil acidity and ant preference for certain seeds, that's something we hadn't considered before. We're going to incorporate that into our broader study." The pride on Ethan's face was indescribable. This was a kid who had been laughed at just weeks ago, now making contributions to actual scientific research. Of course, news of Ethan's involvement with the institute started to spread. It began when his science teacher, Mr. F, pulled him aside after class one day. "I hear you're working with the Ecological Research Institute," he said, his tone suspiciously friendly. "That's quite an opportunity." "Yes, sir," Ethan replied politely. "They're helping me develop my ant project." "The same project from the science fair?" Mr. F asked, eyebrows raised. "Well, I always thought it showed promise. You know, I encourage all my students to think outside the box." When Ethan told me about this conversation that evening, I had to bite my tongue. This was the same teacher who had dismissed his project as more of a gardening club entry. Now he was trying to rewrite history. "What did you say to him?" I asked. Ethan shrugged. "I just said thank you. But Mom, he never liked my project before." "People sometimes change their tune when they realize they were wrong," I explained. Just focus on your work with Dr. L and don't worry about Mr. F. But it wasn't just Mr. F who suddenly took an interest in Ethan's project. The following week, I received a call from Mrs. B, the PTA chair. "Hello. I was just calling to check in about Ethan's science project," she said with forced cheerfulness. "I heard he's been selected for some special program with scientists." "That's right," I replied, keeping my tone neutral despite the annoyance bubbling inside me. The Ecological Research Institute was very impressed with his science fair project. "How lovely," she cooed. "You know, Timothy was saying just the other day how interesting he found Ethan's project. The PTA is planning an Earth Day event next month, and we thought it might be nice to have Ethan talk about his work, you know, to inspire the younger children." I hesitated. Part of me was tempted to remind her how she had dismissed his project and called it quaint. But another part of me recognized this as an opportunity for Ethan to gain confidence in presenting his work. "That's a nice offer," I said carefully. "Let me discuss it with Ethan and also check with Dr. L. Since this is now part of the Institute's research, I want to make sure sharing preliminary findings is appropriate." Of course, Mrs. B replied quickly. "Just let me know. And do tell Ethan that Timothy is very impressed. Perhaps the boys could get together sometime to discuss their scientific interests." After hanging up, I sat staring at the phone, a mixture of amusement and irritation washing over me. The same woman who had looked down her nose at Ethan's project now wanted to showcase it. The same kid who had won the science fair with his father's help was suddenly interested in being friends with my son. When I told Ethan about the call, he seemed confused. "But Mrs. B didn't like my project," he said. "She said it wasn't real science." "Well, now she knows better," I replied. "But you don't have to do the presentation if you don't want to." He thought about it for a moment. "I think I want to focus on the work with Dr. L right now. The symposium is in 3 months, and I need to get ready for that." I was proud of his maturity and his ability to prioritize what really mattered to him. I called Mrs. B back the next day to politely decline, explaining that Ethan was focused on preparing for the Regional Youth Science Symposium. "Oh, he's presenting at the symposium?" Her voice couldn't hide her surprise. "That's quite impressive. Well, perhaps after the symposium then. The experience would be beneficial for the other children." "Perhaps," I replied noncommittally. "I'll keep you posted." As the weeks passed, Ethan continued to thrive under Dr. L's mentorship. His confidence grew alongside his knowledge. The observation that had impressed Dr. L about soil acidity and seed preferences led to a significant discovery. Certain native wildflower seeds were being disproportionately selected by ants in specific soil conditions, creating natural restoration zones where wildflowers were more likely to flourish. This finding became the centerpiece of his symposium presentation. Dr. L helped him refine his research methods, analyze his data, and present his findings in a clear, scientific manner. They even designed a series of controlled experiments to confirm his observations. 2 months into the program, Dr. L invited us to her office at the main institute building. It was more formal than our usual meetings at the field station, and I could tell she had something important to discuss. "Ethan's work has exceeded our expectations," she began after we were seated. "His findings about the relationship between soil conditions, ant behavior, and seed selection have significant implications for ecological restoration efforts." Ethan beamed at the praise. "We believe his research is strong enough to be included in an upcoming paper our team is publishing on native plant restoration strategies," she continued. "Ethan would be acknowledged as a contributing researcher." Really?" Ethan and I said almost in unison. "Additionally," Dr. L went on, "we'd like to expand on his initial observation chamber design. With some refinements, it could become an educational tool for citizen scientists and schools to study local ant populations and their ecological impacts." She slid a folder across the desk. "We've prepared a formal proposal. The Institute would work with Ethan to develop what we're calling the Mermako viewer, essentially an improved version of his observation chamber that could be produced for educational purposes. Ethan would be credited as the original designer, and if there's any commercial aspect in the future, he would receive appropriate recognition and compensation." I opened the folder to find a detailed proposal, complete with preliminary designs based on Ethan's original concept, but enhanced with features like magnification panels and improved ventilation. "This is incredible," I managed, feeling slightly overwhelmed. "There's one more thing," Dr. L said. "The Regional Environmental Council has become interested in our research, particularly the applications for urban wildflower restoration. They've asked us to present our findings at their next public meeting, and I'd like Ethan to co-present with me. Ethan's eyes grew wide. A real presentation? To adults? To city officials, environmental planners, and community members, Dr. L confirmed. Your insights would be extremely valuable to the discussion. As we drove home, I couldn't help but think about how drastically things had changed in just 2 months. From being laughed at and dismissed at a school science fair to being invited to present to city officials and contribute to published research, it was more than I could have ever hoped for. Are you nervous about the presentation? I asked Ethan. A little, he admitted. But Dr. L says I know more about these ants than almost anyone else now. I just need to tell people what I've learned. His simple confidence brought tears to my eyes. This was my son, coming into his own, discovering his value and his voice. The news about Ethan's upcoming presentation to the Regional Environmental Council spread quickly. The local newspaper ran a small article about the Institute's research, mentioning contributions from a gifted young local scientist. They didn't name Ethan since he was a minor, but everyone in our small community knew who they meant. Mr. F approached me after school one day, his manner oddly deferential. I've heard about Ethan's success with the Research Institute, he said. I always knew he had potential. In fact, I've been telling my colleague teachers that we need to encourage more creative thinking like his in our science curriculum. I nodded politely, biting back the urge to remind him of his dismissive comments at the science fair. The school board is very impressed, he continued. They've asked me to look into establishing a partnership with the Institute for future science education initiatives. I was hoping Ethan might put in a good word with Dr. L. The audacity was almost laughable. I'm sure Dr. L would be happy to discuss educational outreach with the school, I replied neutrally. You could contact her directly at the Institute. Mrs. B was even more brazen. She cornered me at the grocery store, Timothy in tow. We've been following Ethan's progress with such interest, she gushed. I always tell Timothy that science is about observation and critical thinking, not just flashy presentations, don't I, Timothy? Timothy nodded dutifully, looking bored. In fact, she continued, lowering her voice confidentially, between us, I had some concerns about the judging at the science fair. I thought Ethan's project deserved more recognition. But you know how these things go. Politics. She rolled her eyes as if we were co-conspirators. It took every ounce of self-control not to call her out on her hypocrisy. Instead, I smiled thinly and said, How interesting. I recall you were quite pleased with the results at the time. Her face flushed slightly. Well, as head of the PTA, I have to maintain a certain diplomacy, you understand. But privately, I've always been a supporter of unconventional scientific inquiry. How fortunate for Ethan, I replied, my tone dry. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a busy evening ahead. Ethan needs to prepare for his presentation with the Environmental Council. As we walked away, Ethan whispered, Mom, why was Mrs. B being so nice? She hated my project. She didn't hate your project, honey, I corrected him. She just didn't understand its value. Now that other people have recognized it, she wants to pretend she saw its potential all along. That's weird, he said frankly. Yes, I agreed. It is. The day of the Regional Youth Science Symposium arrived faster than we expected. It was held at the convention center in the nearby city, a much grander venue than Ethan's middle school gymnasium. Young scientists from across the region were presenting their research projects, with topics ranging from renewable energy to disease prevention. Ethan's presentation was scheduled for the afternoon session. As we set up his display, now a professional-looking poster with graphs, data tables, and high-resolution photographs of the ants in action, I noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Mr. F was wandering between the displays, occasionally stopping to chat with presenters. When he spotted us, he made a beeline for our table. Ethan, wonderful to see you here, he said heartily. I came to support our school's star scientist. Thank you, Mr. F, Ethan replied politely, though I could see the confusion in his eyes. I've been telling everyone at school about your research, Mr. F continued. In fact, the principal is considering creating a special ecology club based on your work. Would you be interested in helping to lead it when it gets started? Before Ethan could respond, Dr. L arrived with several colleagues. Ethan, the judges will be coming around soon. Are you ready? She asked, before noticing Mr. F. Hello, I'm Dr. L from the Ecological Research Institute. Mr. F, Ethan's science teacher, he replied, extending his hand eagerly. I've been encouraging Ethan's interest in ecology since I first saw the potential in his project. We're so proud of him at our school. Dr. L gave him a measured look. Interesting. Ethan mentioned he received quite different feedback initially. Mr. F's smile faltered slightly. Well, you know how it is with young scientists. Sometimes we need to challenge them to really bring out their best work. Indeed, Dr. L replied coolly before turning back to Ethan. The judges are particularly interested in your findings about soil acidity and seed selection. Make sure to highlight those correlations. As Mr. F awkwardly excused himself, I couldn't help but feel a small surge of satisfaction. Dr. L clearly wasn't buying his revisionist version of events. When it was Ethan's turn to present, he stood confidently before the judges and audience. Gone was the shy boy who had been mocked a few months ago. In his place stood a young researcher, passionately explaining how ant behavior could be leveraged for ecological restoration. Our findings suggest that by understanding the preferences of local ant species, we can strategically place native wildflower seeds in locations where they're most likely to be dispersed effectively, he explained, pointing to his data charts. This could significantly improve the success rate of restoration efforts while working with natural processes instead of against them. The judges asked thoughtful questions, which Ethan answered with confidence and clarity. When one judge inquired about the practical applications, Ethan demonstrated the prototype of the Mermaco viewer that he and the Institute were developing. This tool allows citizen scientists and students to observe ant behavior in relation to different seeds and soil conditions, he explained. By gathering data across diverse locations, we can create a more comprehensive understanding of these ecological relationships. When the awards were announced that evening, Ethan received the Innovation in Environmental Science Award, complete with a small grant to continue his research. The pride on his face as he accepted the award was something I'll never forget. But the real validation came from the other young scientists who crowded around him afterward, genuinely interested in his research and full of questions. This wasn't polite attention or the sudden interest of adults who had previously dismissed him. It was authentic recognition from peers who understood the value of his work. As we were packing up to leave, Dr. L approached us with exciting news. The Regional Environmental Council was very impressed with our presentation last week, she said. They've approved funding for a pilot project based on our research, including Ethan's findings on optimizing seed dispersal through ant behavior. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means, Dr. L explained with a smile, that the city is going to implement Ethan's research in real-world ecological restoration. 3 urban parks will be using our methodology for reintroducing native wildflowers, with ant-friendly corridors and strategically placed seed distributions based on Ethan's data. Ethan's jaw dropped. They're actually going to use my research? For real parks? For real parks, Dr. L confirmed. And here's the best part. They want to hold a public announcement and demonstration next month. They'd like you to be part of it, to explain the science behind the project to the community. That's amazing, Ethan exclaimed. As we drove home that evening, with the award certificate carefully placed on the back seat and the sound of Ethan excitedly planning what he'd say at the public announcement, I reflected on the incredible journey of the past few months. From the heartbreak of seeing my son mocked and dismissed, to the triumph of watching him receive recognition that went far beyond any school competition, it had been a roller coaster of emotions. But through it all, Ethan had shown remarkable resilience and growth. What none of us realized yet was that the upcoming public announcement would bring our story full circle in the most satisfying way possible. The weeks leading up to the Regional Environmental Council's public announcement were busy ones for Ethan. Between his regular schoolwork, continued research with the Institute, and preparing for the presentation, he barely had time to breathe. But I'd never seen him so motivated and engaged. Dr. L worked closely with him to prepare his remarks for the event, helping him find the right balance between scientific accuracy and accessibility for a general audience. They also refined the prototype of the Mermaco viewer to be displayed at the event. We want to showcase not just the research findings, but also how citizen scientists can get involved, Dr. L explained during one of their preparation sessions. Your observation chamber design is perfect for that. Word about the upcoming event spread quickly through our community. The local newspaper ran a more detailed article this time, featuring an interview with Dr. L about the innovative urban restoration project, and mentioning the crucial contributions of a young local scientist, whose observations sparked new research directions. One evening after school, Ethan came home with an interesting piece of news. "Mom, guess what?" he said as he dropped his backpack on the kitchen counter. "Principal Jay stopped me in the hallway today. He said the school is going to send an official delegation to the Environmental Council event. Oh, I replied, my interest piqued. Did he say who would be attending? He said he'll be there, and Mr. F, and they're bringing the school board president, Ethan said. And get this, they want me to be recognized at the next school assembly for bringing honor to the school. I couldn't help but laugh. Interesting timing. I know, right? Ethan grinned. Even better, Mrs. B cornered me after school. She said the PTA is planning to attend the event in force to show their support. She asked if I could mention the school's support of scientific inquiry in my speech. And what did you tell her? I asked, curious about how my once shy son had handled this. I told her that Dr. L and I had already finalized my remarks based on the scientific content, but I appreciated the PTA's interest, he replied with a surprisingly diplomatic tone. She looked kind of disappointed. I smiled proudly. That was a very professional response. The day before the event, I received a call from Mrs. B. Her voice was syrupy sweet as she explained that the PTA had prepared a special certificate of achievement for Ethan. We'd love to present it to him at the Environmental Council event, she said. Perhaps right after his speech. It would be such a wonderful photo opportunity. That's very thoughtful, I replied carefully. But I believe the event organizers have a specific schedule. You might want to check with them directly. Oh, I'm sure they can accommodate a brief presentation from Ethan's school community, she insisted. After all, we've nurtured his scientific curiosity from the beginning. The audacity was breathtaking. Have you? I asked, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. That's not how I remember the science fair. There was a pause before she responded, her tone suddenly defensive. Well, these events can be so hectic. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding, but we've always valued Ethan's unique perspective. I'll pass along your request to Dr. L, I said, not bothering to hide my skepticism, but I can't make any promises about the program. When I mentioned the call to Dr. L later that day, she raised an eyebrow. Interesting, she said. We've actually had several requests from the school to be included in the program. The principal called yesterday asking for speaking time. Really? I was surprised but not shocked. What did you tell him? That the program was already finalized by the Environmental Council, she replied with a slight smile. But they're welcome to attend as community members, of course. The day of the public announcement arrived. The event was being held at the main city park, where the first implementation of Ethan's research would take place. A small stage had been set up near the planned restoration area, with chairs for about 100 people, though Dr. L expected more might attend. When we arrived for the pre-event briefing, I was amazed to see how many people had already gathered. There were city officials in business attire, environmental activists with Save Our Native Plants t-shirts, local media with cameras and notepads, and a large contingent from Ethan's school, including Principal J, Mr. F, and what looked like the entire PTA board, led by Mrs. B. Timothy, her son, was there too, looking bored as usual. I couldn't help but notice that Mrs. B had positioned him front and center, as if hoping he'd be included in any photographs. Dr. L introduced Ethan to the Environmental Council members, who treated him with genuine respect and interest. The council chair, an older gentleman with kind eyes, knelt down to shake Ethan's hand. "Young man," he said warmly, "your research has opened our eyes to a new approach to urban ecological restoration. We're deeply grateful for your contributions." Ethan beamed with pride. "Thank you, sir. I'm just happy it can help the wildflowers grow back." As the event was about to begin, I spotted Mrs. B making her way toward the stage, clutching what looked like a framed certificate. Dr. L intercepted her smoothly. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. "We have a presentation for Ethan from his school," Mrs. B explained, gesturing to the certificate. "I thought right after his speech would be perfect." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Dr. L replied firmly. "The program is quite full, and we're already concerned about running over time. Perhaps you could give it to him afterward." Mrs. B's smile tightened. But it would mean so much coming from his school community, who have supported his scientific interests from the beginning. I saw Dr. L's eyebrow rise slightly. "Is that so? That's not consistent with what Ethan has shared about his science fair experience." Mrs. B flushed. "Well, I'm sure there were some misunderstandings. Children can be so sensitive." "Indeed," Dr. L replied coolly. "If you'll excuse me, we need to begin the program." The event started with the Environmental Council chair welcoming everyone and explaining the importance of native plant restoration in urban environments. He then introduced Dr. L, who gave an overview of the Institute's research on ant-assisted seed dispersal. But the breakthrough in our understanding, she said, came from an unexpected source, a young citizen scientist who observed patterns that we professionals had overlooked. She turned to gesture to Ethan. I'd like to introduce you to our key collaborator on this project. Ethan walked confidently to the microphone. Gone was the heartbroken boy from the science fair, replaced by a poised young researcher who spoke with clarity and enthusiasm about his findings. What I discovered, he explained, pointing to the large display boards showing his data, was that certain ant species don't just randomly move seeds. They have preferences based on seed type and soil conditions. By mapping these preferences, we can predict where seeds are most likely to be successfully dispersed and establish healthy plant populations. He demonstrated the Myrmico viewer, showing how it allowed for observation of ant behavior in different soil conditions. This tool can help anyone contribute to our understanding of local ecosystems, he said. You don't need expensive equipment to be a scientist, just curiosity and careful observation. The audience was captivated. I could see genuine interest in their faces. Nothing like the polite dismissal or mockery Ethan had faced at the science fair. Even more satisfying was seeing the expressions of Principal J and Mr. F, who kept nodding vigorously as if they'd been supporters all along. After Ethan's presentation, the Environmental Council chair returned to the microphone. Thanks to this innovative research, we're implementing a new approach to wildflower restoration in 3 city parks, beginning with this one. He gestured to the roped-off area behind him. We expect this method to increase successful establishment rates by up to 40% while reducing costs compared to traditional planting methods. He turned to Ethan. Young man, your contribution to our community's environmental health is significant and appreciated. The council would like to present you with a certificate of recognition and announce that this first restoration zone will be named the Young Scientist Wildflower Meadow in honor of your work. Ethan's face lit up as he accepted the framed certificate. Photographers from the local newspaper snapped pictures, and there was enthusiastic applause from the crowd. As the formal program concluded and people began to mingle, Principal J made a beeline for Ethan, with Mr. F and Mrs. B close behind. Ethan, remarkable presentation, the principal gushed, extending his hand. We are so proud to have you representing our school. Your scientific achievement brings honor to our entire educational community. Mr. F nodded enthusiastically. I always knew you had a unique scientific mind. Your approach to the original science fair project showed such promise. I couldn't stay silent anymore. That's interesting, Mr. F, I said, keeping my voice level but firm. I recall you had quite a different assessment at the time, something about it being more of a gardening club entry. Mr. F's face flushed. Well, perhaps there was a misunderstanding. I always encourage creative scientific thinking. The Environmental Council chair, who had been standing nearby, looked interested. Oh, there was some controversy about this research initially? Mrs. B jumped in quickly. Not at all. Our school has always supported innovative science. In fact, we have a certificate of achievement for Ethan from the PTA. She thrust forward the framed certificate, which appeared to have been hastily printed and framed, with a large PTA logo at the top. Dr. L, who had joined our growing circle, asked mildly, I'm curious, if the school was so supportive, why wasn't Ethan's project recognized at the science fair? From what I observed when I attended, it received no acknowledgement despite its scientific merit. Principal J looked confused. You were at our science fair? I was, Dr. L confirmed. I make a point of visiting local science fairs to identify promising young researchers. I witnessed Ethan's project being quite openly dismissed by school staff and parents. In fact, I heard some rather discouraging comments directed at him. The principal's expression shifted from confusion to concern. He turned to Mr. F. Is this true? Mr. F stammered. Well, science fairs are competitive environments. We can't recognize every project. Of course not, Dr. L agreed. But I would expect educational professionals to recognize genuine scientific inquiry regardless of whether it fits conventional expectations. She turned to Mrs. B, and I would hope parent leaders wouldn't openly mock a child's work simply because it lacks flash. Mrs. B's face turned scarlet. I never mocked anyone. I merely commented that some projects were more sophisticated than others. Like your son's nuclear reactor model? I asked innocently. The one you repeatedly called real science while dismissing Ethan's work as quaint? The Environmental Council chair was watching this exchange with interest. It sounds like there's quite a story here, he remarked. There is, said a new voice. A woman from the local newspaper had been listening nearby. And I think it's an important one about recognizing genuine scientific talent even when it doesn't come in expected packages. She turned to Ethan. Would you be willing to share your experience for an article about your journey from school science fair to citywide implementation of your research? Before Ethan could answer, Principal J intervened. I'm sure there's no need to dwell on any misunderstandings at the science fair. The important thing is that our school community recognizes Ethan's achievement now. But that's exactly the point, the reporter persisted. Recognition only after external validation isn't the same as fostering scientific inquiry from the start. I think readers would be interested in how true scientific talent sometimes has to overcome institutional barriers. Mrs. B clutched her certificate tighter. I hardly think it's appropriate to cast our school in a negative light. We're here to celebrate Ethan's success, which we've supported from the beginning. I couldn't let that stand. From the beginning? I repeated, looking directly at her. Mrs. B, you literally laughed at his project. You told him it wasn't real science. You and Mr. F both dismissed work that professional scientists later recognized as valuable. And now you want to pretend you supported him all along? There was an uncomfortable silence. Several other parents who had been at the science fair were nearby, and I could see them shifting awkwardly, perhaps remembering their own dismissive reactions. Ethan, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. I don't want to make anyone feel bad, he said with a maturity beyond his years, but I do think it's important to be honest about what happened. He looked at the reporter. When I presented my project at the science fair, most people didn't think it was worth their time. It didn't have lights or motors or fancy displays. It was just ants and seeds and dirt. But Dr. L saw something valuable in it because she was looking at the science, not the presentation. He turned to Principal J. If you want to support student scientists at our school, maybe that's the most important lesson. Good science isn't always flashy. Sometimes it's just careful observation of something most people don't even notice. There was a moment of silence. Then the Environmental Council chair began to applaud, followed quickly by Dr. L and others around us. The reporter was scribbling furiously in her notebook. Principal J looked simultaneously embarrassed and impressed. After a moment, he nodded solemnly. You're absolutely right, Ethan. And perhaps our school's science program needs to reflect on that lesson. He turned to Mr. F. I think we should discuss some changes to our science fair judging criteria, don't you? Mr. F, looking thoroughly chastened, nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. Perhaps Dr. L and the Institute might advise us on establishing more objective standards? Mrs. B, realizing the narrative had completely escaped her control, made one last attempt. Well, I think we can all agree that what matters is that we're celebrating Ethan now, she said, still holding out the certificate, and the PTA would like to present this token of our ongoing support. Dr. L stepped in smoothly. I'm sure Ethan appreciates the gesture. Perhaps you could give it to him after the interviews. The Environmental Council has arranged for several media outlets to speak with him about the scientific aspects of the project. As Mrs. B reluctantly backed away, I caught Ethan's eye and gave him a subtle thumbs up. He responded with a small, satisfied smile that spoke volumes. The aftermath of the Environmental Council event exceeded even my wildest expectations. The local newspaper's article, titled, Young Scientists' Overlooked Discovery Revolutionizes City's Environmental Approach, ran on the front page of the Sunday edition. It told the full story, from the dismissal at the science fair to Dr. L's recognition, through to the city's implementation of Ethan's research. The reporter hadn't pulled any punches in describing the science fair judging, quoting several witnesses who confirmed the dismissive treatment Ethan had received. Mr. F was directly quoted from the fair saying the project was more appropriate for a gardening club, while Mrs. B's real science comment about her son's project was also included. The contrast between the initial reception and the project's ultimate impact made for a compelling narrative about overlooked potential and the need for more inclusive approaches to science education. The public response was immediate and overwhelmingly supportive of Ethan. The newspaper's online version of the article received hundreds of comments. many from parents sharing similar stories of creative children whose ideas were dismissed because they didn't fit conventional expectations. The school board called an emergency meeting the following week. Principal J, clearly trying to get ahead of the situation, announced a comprehensive review of the science curriculum and extracurricular programs, with a new emphasis on diverse approaches to scientific inquiry. We want to ensure that innovative thinking is recognized and nurtured, regardless of whether it fits traditional models, he stated in a press release, that somehow failed to mention the catalyst for this sudden interest in educational reform. Mr. F was removed as the science fair coordinator and assigned to a hastily created professional development committee, tasked with researching best practices in science education. The rumor was that he'd been given a choice between this reassignment or a formal reprimand in his personnel file. As for Mrs. B, the fallout was equally significant. At the next PTA meeting, which had unusually high attendance, she faced tough questions about the science fair judging and her treatment of student participants. Several parents explicitly called for new leadership that would support all children's academic efforts, not just the most privileged or flashy. Faced with this unprecedented challenge to her authority, Mrs. B attempted to reframe herself as a champion of educational reform who had learned valuable lessons from recent events. But the damage was done. By the end of the meeting, she had voluntarily stepped down as PTA chair, citing a desire to allow new perspectives to guide the organization forward. Timothy, her son, faced his own minor reckoning when several classmates questioned how much of his nuclear reactor model he had actually built himself. The general consensus seemed to be that money and parental involvement had played a larger role than actual scientific understanding. Meanwhile, Ethan's star continued to rise. The young scientist Wildflower Meadow became a point of pride for the city, with guided tours explaining the ant-assisted restoration method. The first bloom of wildflowers was spectacular, with native species returning to the urban park in numbers not seen in decades. The Myrmico Viewer was developed into an educational kit that was distributed to schools across the region, with Ethan's name credited as the original designer. Dr. L ensured that he received not only recognition but also a small royalty from each kit sold, which we put into a college fund. Most importantly, Ethan thrived. His confidence grew not just in science but in all aspects of his life. He made new friends who genuinely appreciated his unique perspective, and he developed a quiet assurance that came from knowing his worth wasn't dependent on others' validation. 6 months after the Environmental Council event, Ethan was invited to speak at a regional environmental education conference. As I watched him confidently address a room full of educators and scientists, sharing his passion for observation and discovery, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we'd come from that devastating day at the science fair. After his presentation, as we walked through the conference center together, he turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom," he said, "do you think Mrs. B and Mr. F learned anything from all this?" I considered the question carefully. "I hope so, honey. I hope they learned that real value isn't always obvious at first glance, and that they shouldn't be so quick to judge things they don't understand." He nodded. "I think some people did learn. The new PTA chair asked me to help plan next year's science fair, to make sure it's more fair for everyone." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. "Will you do it?" "Yeah, I think so," he replied. Dr. L said that good scientists don't just make discoveries, they also help other people learn to see things differently. As we headed home that evening, I thought about the remarkable journey we'd been on. What had started as a painful experience of rejection and mockery had transformed into something powerful and positive, not just for Ethan, but potentially for countless other students whose unconventional ideas might now be recognized rather than dismissed. The science fair that had once been a scene of heartbreak was now an opportunity for meaningful change. The people who had laughed at my son's project had been humbled, while those who had recognized his potential had been vindicated. But the sweetest victory wasn't in seeing the humiliation of Mrs. B or the professional consequences for Mr. F. It was in watching my once shy son stand tall, confident in his abilities and excited about the future. It was in knowing that his unique way of seeing the world was now valued rather than dismissed, and that his work was making a real difference in our community. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about moving forward and succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. And in that, Ethan had truly come out on top. Update: 1 year later. It's been a year since the Environmental Council event that changed everything, and I wanted to share how things have developed since then. The young scientist Wildflower Meadow has become a stunning success. Not only is it now a riot of colorful native blooms that attract butterflies and bees, but the restoration model has been implemented in 7 additional parks across the region. Environmental scientists have documented a significant increase in pollinator activity in these areas, and other cities have begun implementing similar approaches. The Myrmico Viewer Educational Kit has gone national, with schools in 38 states now using it in their science programs. Ethan receives letters from students and teachers sharing their observations and discoveries, which he diligently responds to with encouragement and suggestions for further investigation. Dr. L and her team published their research paper in a prestigious ecological journal, with Ethan credited as a contributing researcher. This unprecedented recognition of a middle school student's work generated significant attention in the scientific community, and has sparked discussions about expanding opportunities for young citizen scientists. As for our local school, the changes have been substantial. The science fair was completely restructured, with new judging criteria that emphasize original thinking, careful methodology, and genuine scientific inquiry, rather than presentation flash. Dr. L and several of her colleagues served as judges, bringing professional scientific standards to the evaluation process. Mr. F underwent something of a transformation. After his initial embarrassment, he seems to have genuinely reflected on his approach to teaching. He attended several professional development workshops on fostering scientific curiosity, and has become an advocate for recognizing unconventional student talents. He apologized to Ethan privately for dismissing his project, and has made efforts to be more encouraging of all his students. Mrs. B has maintained a much lower profile since stepping down as PTA chair. She still attends school events but no longer dominates them. Timothy, her son, seems happier without the pressure of being the star student and has found his own genuine interest in computer programming. The new PTA leadership has focused on creating more inclusive events and ensuring that all students have access to enrichment opportunities regardless of their parents' resources. They established a science equipment lending library so that students without means can still create meaningful projects. As for Ethan, he's flourishing. He continues to work with the Research Institute through their Young Ecological Researchers program, and has expanded his interests to include other aspects of environmental science. He's made friends with like-minded peers from across the region and has developed a quiet confidence that serves him well in all aspects of life. Perhaps most significantly, he's discovered that his voice matters, that his observations and ideas can create positive change in the world around him. That lesson, more than any scientific discovery, is the one I'm most grateful for. Last week, Ethan received an invitation to speak at a National Youth Science Conference next summer. As he excitedly shared his ideas for his presentation, I couldn't help but think back to that painful day at the school science fair when a group of narrow-minded adults tried to crush his spirit. They say success is the best revenge, but I think it's more accurate to say that growth is. Ethan has grown beyond the need for validation from people like Mrs. B and Mr. F. He's found his place in a community that values curiosity, careful observation, and innovative thinking, the very qualities that were once dismissed. And me? I've learned that sometimes, when people laugh at your child's dreams, the best response isn't immediate confrontation but patient support while you help them prove the doubters wrong. The kind woman in a suit who saw potential where others saw only dirt and ants didn't just change my son's life, she changed our entire community's understanding of what young minds are capable of. For any parent whose child has been underestimated or dismissed, I hope our story offers some encouragement. The path to vindication may be longer than you'd like, but when it comes, the victory is all the sweeter for the journey.